and then we've had a couple chat, and this is like our second sip and chat. So the first one went really good, and I know this one will even be spectacular, having somebody to talk to us more about what they do and things, something we can also learn to impact our lives as women and as a global organization. So thank you so much. It was the next slide. If who's moving the slides, if I may ask?
I think it's me, Jennifer.
Okay. All right. So as you all know, this is going to be the agenda for today. My name is Jennifer Adu. I'm based in the US, and I'm the chairperson for the WiLAT North America region. It was officially inaugurated on September 28th of last year. So I welcome you all to our webinar section this afternoon. Feel free to we call it sip and chat. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab whatever is in your cup. It's only you who knows. So feel comfortable, relaxed as we enjoy this section together. So thank you once again for joining this section. And basically, so this is what we are. We are the charter, we are part of CILT, which is the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transportation, one of the world's oldest body of logistics, supply chain, and transportation. We have a network of over 30,000 professionals in 40 countries on 5 continents. So that's very big. So within the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transportation is the Women in Logistics and Transport, which is what we are here. And we are the North America region, which comprises of the US, Canada, and hopefully to join, also to hopefully join the Caribbean part of it, because they are kind of dominant right now. They're trying to be part of us to kind of revamp it. So we'll see how it goes. We offer female members information sharing and network opportunities, and we encourage also have plus encouraging and supporting career development through email communications, through our webinar sessions, and hopefully face-to-face very soon. We'll see how best to get that done so that we can get to meet and mingle more on a facial face. So for now, almost everything has been on the virtual base. So CILT North America has chapters in Pacific region, which is British Columbia and the Prairies, Toronto/Hamilton, Ottawa, Quebec, and then the US chapter with members across the continent. So in North America, we are looking to connect women working in transportation and logistics fields. So if you know anybody who you think would be interested, or organizations that would be interested, please let us know. You can reach out, especially to Rebecca. She's our administrator for CILT, the Chartered Institute of Logistics North America region. And before you can become part of WiLAT, you had to be part of the CILT North America region, which is a prerequisite. So we are open, and we are looking for more people who have enthusiasm in the transportation and logistics field, who are willing to join us to move this along and to make it a fun place for everybody while we learn things that would develop or encourage, motivate us as women, because we know that as women, we can bring a change to the world. I know there's one quote that said, if you educate a man, you educate an individual, but if you educate a female, you educate a whole nation. So I'm hoping that we can bring change in the world as women, and they can see that there's women empowerment as well. So thank you. And I believe the next slide will be, okay, so this one is actually, I think, yeah, okay. So like I said, if you like to lead a hand or build our WiLAT story, we are looking for between 3 or 4 people to help with our communications committee or department, as we'll call it, to help with newsletters, introduce our members to each other, reach out about WiLAT on social media links. And so we want to spread our wings. We want to be broader. Even though we are a small core group right now, we know we can build it, and we need your help as well. So we will be putting in our emails as well, but we wanted to also put it out here that if you're interested or you have a passion in communications, or you have a passion in women development, or you have a passion in transportation, or you have a passion to help us grow our team, please reach out to us through our email or through our contact or through Rebecca or myself, and we'll be glad to have you on that communications team, because we want to, like I say, we want to expand it. So thank you as well. And I believe with that being said, we will be our speaker. I'm sorry, what's the next slide? Is that the one that I introduced our speaker? Or okay, these are some calendar dates.
So I think I'm going to stop share now. We're going to have correct?
I'm sorry.
I'll stop sharing and let Peta sign on now.
Okay, yeah. So she can sign on now, but before Peta comes on, I would like to give a brief background about her, a brief biography about our speaker for today. So Peta, I hope I pronounced your last name wrong, but please, if I don't, forgive me because of my accent or what it is. Is it Wolmarans?
Perfect, Jennifer. Excellent.
All right. So our speaker for today, Ms. Peta, is a transportation planner and a champion of data-driven decision-making. She has worked at Vancouver International Airport since 2018 as the airport authority navigated through both the busiest and quietest years since its inception. Peta leads the team responsible for long-range planning of airside, terminal, and groundside infrastructure and land assets. In 2021, she helped develop the airport's post-pandemic strategic plan, including climate, digital transformation, indigenous reconciliation, indigenous reconciliation, financial sustainability, and creating a gateway to the new economy. She leads the airport's climate adaptation working group and is currently part of the team developing the YVR energy strategy. Prior to joining the airport authority, Peta spent more than 20 years as a consultant supporting infrastructure projects across the globe, including high-speed rail, rapid transit, port, and airport projects. It is my warmest pleasure to welcome Peta to the session this afternoon as our guest speaker, and I hand it over to you, Peta, to sail us away. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. I am going to try and share my screen with you. I have to tell you that, can you see that? How's that? Perfect. Excellent.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
So I have to tell you, I'm speaking to you from BC, Vancouver, BC, and yesterday was a holiday. So for me, it's Monday. If I'm discombobulated, forgive me, but I can't think of a better way to begin the week than to spend some time with you. So I've been told that I have 45 minutes. I am going to just speak, but please interrupt me. I think rather than having questions and answers, let's have more of a conversation. What I wanted to chat with you about is just the airport's experience of change and how we've navigated through that and succeeded, and also learned from some of the mistakes that have been made. So first and foremost, I am speaking from I'm speaking from territory which is unceded and the ancestral home of Musqueam people here in Vancouver. The airport is located on an island called Sea Island, which has been home to the Musqueam for thousands of years. So just starting with a little bit of an orientation, you can see where we are. We're almost on the westernmost part of Canada, very close to downtown, which is unusual for an airport, and surrounded by a metropolitan area, the US border quite close to the south, and then agricultural land. So a metropolitan area which is quite hemmed in, North Shore Mountains to the north as well. So just taking a slightly more zoomed in look at the island, we're an airport with 3 paved runways. So you can see a north, south, and a crosswind runway. But interestingly enough, we have a 4th runway, which I'm wondering whether any of you can identify. It's actually the river, because we also have a float plane operation here on Sea Island. So YVR, as we call it, which is the acronym for Vancouver, is a global gateway. It's a local economic generator. Before COVID, more than 26,000 people were employed on Sea Island, and a significant contributor to the community in terms of economic impact, but also in terms of our role. It's slightly different if you're in the US to US airports. We're a private, non-share capital, community-based corporation. So we exist to serve the community and the economy that sustains it. Before COVID, we were voted best airport in North America for 12 years in a row. And during COVID, voted one of the cleanest, safest, and healthiest airports in the world. So 26 million passengers in 2019, 56 airlines during that time, 122 destinations, an Asia-Pacific hub. And then we experienced COVID. Of course, not the only industry to be hit by COVID, but possibly with the exception of cruise, I would say one of the worst hit industries during that time. So this is a snapshot of a busy summer day in 2019. You can see everybody getting ready to go on their vacation, a thriving place. By 2020, our passenger numbers had dropped down to 7.3 million, and in 2021 down to 7.1 million. Working in aviation, it has peaks and troughs, and every 8 to 10 years, something typically tends to happen, which affects passenger numbers. So 9/11, SARS, the Great Recession, you kind of expect it. But from 2008 through to 2019, we'd seen successive years of significant growth. As a planner, we would sit and debate what would be the next thing that would be setting us back. And certainly as we do long-term planning, we do modeling and stochastic forecasts, which take into account risk. And we'd sort of stacked those risks. What happens if there was a recession, or God forbid, some kind of terrorist attack and an epidemic at the same time? What would that mean for our passenger numbers and for our business? But we, even with those dire forecasts, did not predict that our numbers would drop to a quarter of what they previously had been, and that drop would be sustained for a long period of time. Good news is, though, by 2022, we were back up to 19 million passengers, and last year, almost as much as what we were in 2019. But that rebound carries with it all sorts of difficulties. Obviously, during COVID, a lot of people had been laid off. A lot of people who'd previously worked in the industry had decided that aviation wasn't for them. And so with the rebound, significant difficulty in rehiring, retraining, recertifying staff. And the ongoing pilot shortage, of course, also affects us. Interestingly, although passenger numbers were profoundly affected through the pandemic, cargo was less affected. So you can see there the numbers 2019 through to 2020. We only saw about a 20% drop in numbers. But what you will also notice here as we look at the overall tonnage is that the structure of the cargo traffic changed fairly significantly. So whereas previous in 2019, a lot of cargo predominantly was carried in the belly of a passenger aircraft, obviously by 2020, there were fewer passenger aircraft. So we saw a shift in that cargo to freighters or integrators, what we call the sort of FedExes and UPSs of the world. So that shift meant that our infrastructure needed to adapt as well. We, typically getting those cans into the belly of an aircraft is one operation when they're passenger aircraft. It's a very different operation when they're freighters, when they're cargo only. And one of the big things that we realized during COVID is that we do not have enough infrastructure to accommodate that type of volume. What we did during that time was we were able to park freighters, or what we call preighters. So they were passenger aircraft that had been converted into freighter aircraft. We were able to park them in and around the terminal because, of course, there was very little demand for passenger aircraft. But more recently, and I'll speak to this, we had to think very hard about providing sufficient apron space, warehouse space to accommodate that freighter traffic. So during the pandemic, we took a long, hard look in 2021 and tried to develop a strategic plan in the middle of a pandemic where one wasn't really sure what the future of aviation would be, and yet the airport needed to keep going. It continued to provide a vital link for emergency personnel, a key link for cargo, and of course moving those people who were able to move and who needed to move around the province and internationally as well. So just a sort of bit of an idea of context. These are our revenues over time from 2010 through to 2020. And you can see the passenger growth drove significant revenue growth. Obviously, expenses grew as well. But that revenue had been composed of a number of different revenue sources. So there was aeronautical revenues from rates and charges. There was non-aeronautical revenue, for example, from duty-free. There were airport improvement fees, parking, and concessions. And you can see in 2020, that revenue dropped off a cliff. But the expenses, although they decreased, did not decrease as quickly or as dramatically as those revenues. And that was because the airport still needed to remain open, no matter how many passengers were going through. We were able to close some of the piers. Obviously, we had a loss of personnel as well, but those expenses kept going. So the big question was, how do we continue to generate the necessary revenues when our passenger numbers are down and where we need to stay open as a vital gateway? And this is a bit of a diagram which sort of depicts some of our thinking at the time. If you imagine, this is the sort of passenger trajectory which had driven all of our plans up until then, through sort of 2010 through to 2019, where we were grow, 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 build as fast as we can, largely to accommodate the peak. We're on the sort of western edge of Canada, and that means our traffic is very peaky. It's driven by people's desire. It's not like London, where you're in the center of the universe, as it were, but it's driven by people's desire to arrive and depart at a reasonable hour, and by that connecting traffic, which also needs to arrive and depart at a reasonable hour. But what we realized was that whereas in the past, our traffic was very much dominated by passenger demand, we saw two things that were happening during the pandemic. The one was digital transformation. We saw that obviously in passenger traffic, where there was a strong desire to minimize the interaction between people during COVID, and to switch to digital or electronic transactions. But we also saw that in cargo. So my colleague was telling me that pre-COVID, to shift a pallet of traffic, there were more than 100 paper transactions which occurred. Well, COVID changed a lot of that because people weren't in offices, and shifted a lot of that to online, whether it be security clearances, weigh bills, etc. And so we started to see a lot more digital. Working from home obviously was another piece to that. And climate transformation. Now, we'd already begun to see the Greta effect prior to COVID. Not huge, but we knew that there was concern about the impact of aviation on climate. And certainly in Europe, we saw a lot more incidents of flight shame, where people were preferring not to fly in favor of other modes, or indeed even to stay at home. But what we saw over time, as COVID recovery was beginning to occur in Europe, is that a lot of those government bailouts were linked to climate transformation. So airports were required to make significant steps to reduce their impact on climate. And so that was a bit of an inflection point in 20, where we believe that some of the things that were going to drive our future was not so much necessarily just around passenger demand, but around digital transformation and around climate transformation as well. So that influenced our thinking. I'm going to pause there because I'm chatting away. I don't see any of you. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions, but again, please feel free to chip in if you do. So our plan at the time, 2022 through to 2024, was based on 6 strategic themes. The first was really staying ahead of COVID, so just coping with the situation at hand. The other was we'd built a really, really strong core. So a core infrastructure, a core group of employees, and we really wanted to hold on to that and to strengthen it. Climate, obviously, I've spoken about already. Financial sustainability, I've alluded to the fact that we needed really to diversify our financial base. And then thinking about our role in the community. And thinking about the economy of the region. Big question was, how do we create a gateway to the new economy, which would allow us to better serve the community? I see that there's something in the chat. Oh, okay, perfect. Just checking nobody has any questions. And then finally, making sure that our people, both within the airport authority, but broadly across Sea Island, are supported, and that we're able to grow that employee community, because people really are at the heart of everything that we do. Underpinning those strategic themes were also a number of drivers. Reconciliation was a big one. We had already developed a friendship and sustainability agreement with the Musqueam, with whom we contribute a proportion of our revenue. We have Musqueam training programs and Musqueam employment programs as well. And we really wanted to ramp that up. It was really interesting, a super interesting learning through the pandemic with our relationship with Musqueam was part of the friendship agreement was that we contribute 1% of revenue back to the Musqueam community. And obviously during COVID, our revenues were down. We were not charging our concessionaires rent because they weren't generating any revenue. And for me, a really interesting thing and which really signified what partnership was about was that Musqueam came to the airport authority as well and said, you do not need to pay us that revenue during COVID, that we're partners in this and we're in this for the long term. And so that's really what partnership is about. I think another big shift for us was a focus on our customers and really understanding what our customers need and want during COVID, obviously a clean and safe environment. But moving forward, also the ability to navigate through that environment in a way which is stress-free and easy. And a lot of that can be facilitated through digital processes. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means in a bit. So I won't spend too much time on this, but this stream is now officially complete. I was so happy last week walking through the airport and I saw that the Perspex screens had actually been taken down, the ones that sort of separated you from the airport personnel when you're checking in, for example. So those have all now been removed and it felt like COVID was over, tapping wood here. But it did feel as though we're through it now. A lot of that staying ahead of COVID, though, involved working very closely with partners to coordinate efforts, whether it be through sort of vaccinating people, making sure that people had the correct paperwork, and just making sure that we didn't have too many lines and that people were safe. And then leveraging the technology, be it ArriveCAN or other technologies to improve predictability and to improve efficiency and customer experience. Big shift for us was strengthening the core. So whereas previously a lot of our attention had focused on building new things, a key focus during this period has been on asset management and maintenance and making sure that what we have got works as efficiently as possible and that we're driving value from existing infrastructure. So our existing terminal building is the biggest building in British Columbia. And through doing some benchmarking against other airports, we came to the conclusion that the footprint we have could likely, if you compare it to an airport like Munich or Heathrow, the space that we have is capable of serving between 40 and 50 million passengers without any expansion. So a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years is really looking at terminal optimization. How do you drive people through that building? More people through the same footprint, giving them a good level of service and a very positive experience. And then similarly on the air side as well, how do we optimize our runways? How do we optimize our taxiways and aprons to make sure that we drive value from those? And then climate, a huge focus of ours, starting with our own assets and infrastructure. Net zero by 2030 was a stretch target at the time. I think there are a number of other institutions and airports who now have also seen that it is possible to get there. But at the same time, and I'll show you a little bit more in a second, reducing airside emissions. So that net zero by 2030 is what we call scope 1 and 2 emissions. So it's our own buildings and operations and the power to support that. The airside emissions are a significantly larger proportion of those emissions. But it was our view that we couldn't expect our airline partners to start doing something about their emissions if we weren't doing it ourselves. So that was why we started right there. Sea Island also has a significant amount of greenfield land, and we wanted to position the airport as a platform for a zero carbon economy. We're very fortunate here in BC that the most of our electricity is generated from hydro. So it's pretty much net zero. But we wanted to sort of build on that. We have a seaplane operator here, Harbour Air, who has pioneered electric seaplane engines. And we really wanted to develop our land, to develop the economy around that. We also recognize that the airport itself is a hub for aviation, but that multimodal travel is likely part of our future. We're on an island and surrounded by water, which can be an advantage. So we started looking at things like possible moving cargo by water, looking at fast ferry services for the movement of cargo to and from Vancouver to Vancouver Island, which is just off to the west. And then, of course, also the long-term possibility of high-speed rail. And then a key part of that also is preparing for the impact of climate change on our infrastructure. We are an island surrounded by water. We're at sea level. And we know from bitter experience over the past few years that climate change is real, and we need to start preparing for it. Gateway to the New Economy was really about how we support emerging and new aviation markets, including cargo, realizing the potential of our land assets. Up until now, we had protected the land that we have for future aviation expansion. So, for example, we had protected a lot of greenfield land and sat on it with the thought that at some stage we would need a third parallel runway. Providing a platform for growth industries, whether that be green, biomedical, a variety of different types of logistics industries. We explored a free trade zone concept, and then also looking very strongly at partnerships and how, as an airport, we can't do it on our own, how we can partner to generate prosperity for the region. So what changes did we make? Well, this a very simplistic, and yet, if it's the first time you've seen it, perhaps complicated diagram. But one of the first changes we made was to update our land use plan. So very broadly, the land use plan is a kind of contract between ourselves and the federal government, who essentially are our landlord, about how we will utilize the land assets on Sea Island. So you can see all this blue area here is defined as airfield. And as I was saying earlier, we had said that we would protect it for a potential new third runway, either one that goes out into the foreshore, you can see that there, or possibly one down in the south parallel runway. But during COVID, we realized that the likelihood of us building a third runway was pretty remote for a number of reasons. One of which was the environmental impact, particularly of a foreshore runway. The other related to the amount of runway capacity in the region. So we're one of 6 airports regionally, and there is other capacity. It does not necessarily have to be at YVR. And then the third reason was our lease with the federal government runs out in 2072. It's one of these sort of unique characteristics of the Canadian airport system, that airports are private, they lease the land from the federal government, and that lease has a timestamp on it. And one of the things that is stipulated in that lease is that when we hand the land back, hand the assets back, it has to be debt-free. And so we realized that the chances of us being able to do that with the current limitation on the lease and build a runway was very unlikely. So we made a deliberate and significant change to our land use plan. And what we did was we took back the land that had previously been reserved for a parallel runway until such time as we actually need it. And then took back some of the land in the north as well from the blue, which would allow us to use our land assets productively for logistics type of uses up here in the north, and then for airside and cargo uses down here in the south. So all in all, took back about 400 acres of greenfield land, which is now in the process of being developed. And that's really, really important for us in terms of revenue generation, our ability to maintain a financially sustainable organization, but also to keep rates and charges low by supplementing that aeronautical revenue with non-aeronautical revenue. So projects currently underway include straightening out of this road up here. It currently bisects the sort of greenfield land, so straightening that out. Working with the provincial government, remember we spoke about partnerships, to improve this bridge access and highway access to 99, which feeds the US border. And then a new cargo village. I alluded to the fact that we had insufficient space for freighters. We're building out a new cargo village with airside connections down here right now. And that another significant change for us was appealing to the federal government for funding via the National Trade Corridors Fund. So we were the recipient of $75 million from the federal government last year to complete this project. Any questions before I continue? Hearing none, I will press on then. A lot of what we were focused on over this time has been building resilience. So as our passengers come back, how can we be sure to give them an experience which is safe, stress-free, and even, dare I say, pleasurable? So one of the big changes that we instituted during this time was to build what we call a digital twin. And the focus of the digital twin for now anyway is real-time situational awareness. So this allows us at any time to understand what aircraft are where in the airport environment, how many passengers are on those aircraft, what the pressures are likely to be on our screening and processing facilities, where the baggage is going to go, and where traffic is on the curb, for example. And all of us have it on our phone. You can see that there. It's currently confined to airport employees, but the intent is that over time we begin to share some of this information with our partners as well. And this is critical because we're able to understand, you can't really see, but through the dashboards that we have, we're able to understand when a significant number of people, for example, are going to hit the customs area, so that CBSA can gear up. It also means that with our customer support folks, we can direct those people to where we anticipate the biggest surges are going to be on the curb, in the parkade as well, wherever the case may be. And then also for our food, beverage, and retail operators, making sure that they know that they're likely to be hit by a wave of customers, and to prepare for that. As I said, all of this is on our phones, but we're also able to call up the dashboards with a week in advance, so that we can do a lot of that planning. One other thing, and this is linked to situational awareness, one other difference I think at YVR compared to other airports through the pandemic was that as we saw passengers start to come back in 2022, we brought our employees back as well. So whereas other airports had focused very much on stay at home, we were required to come back into the airport, and this is operational and non-operational staff. We were required to come back into the airport 3 days a week. And in summer 2022, that was really important because we had an unprecedented number of people moving through our airport as we saw the sort of revenge tourism and recovery after COVID. So having people on hand to assist was really, really important. And understanding where one needed to be was really important as well. And that, of course, was facilitated by that digital twin and the apps on our phones. Where we are with that now, as we sort of move and look to the future, because our strategic plan will be running its course, coming to an end in 2024, is to actually use that data in planning, in simulation, and eventually using AI as well, so that we'll understand when, for example, the weather is bad in the Western US, and it's a winter day here in Vancouver, where we see a lot of traffic to and from the US, that it would be able to predict, oh, you may well, based on past experience, have a problem with gating, with customs. So over time, that digital twin will have layers added to help us do our planning. Another big thing which we faced, and which we were actually able to test during our low traffic COVID years, is just risk and resilience as far as climate goes. We had developed a risk and resilience approach pre-COVID, which was based on the IPCC climate models, and which looked at projections in the sort of, call it medium term, it's actually quite long term, 2050, and longer term, 2080, to try and understand how our infrastructure and our operations would be affected by those changes. As an island, more intense rainfall events are a particular concern in terms of how it affects our ditches and our dikes. We are surrounded by a diking system. Warmer temperatures, this is unique to our region in terms of the climate projections, but obviously affect other regions as well, with hotter temperatures occurring more often. And this is important. We have two main runways, but they're of different lengths. So when we see temperatures exceed 30 degrees, say, it means that that aircraft, especially larger wide-body aircraft, require more runway to take off. And so there's a risk that they may need to jettison cargo before leaving. And as we alluded to earlier, cargo is a really important part of our traffic. So really key to understand what those temperatures mean for our ability to sustain runway operations. Sea level rise and storm surge, again, you can see surrounded by water, but with ocean on the west side there. So hardening of infrastructure, dikes and lighting piers as well are key. The model told us that we would have less snow, but that it would be unpredictable and drier summers. So that means less water available for a range of different uses. In terms of what we experienced, well, in November 2021, we experienced an atmospheric river. And this is just this enormous band of water that sort of dumps down on the environment below. So just for reference, essentially twice the volume of the Amazon River landed on us in, I think, 48 hours, or 25 times the volume of the Mississippi River. And it took out roads and bridges here in BC, with a net effect that airports were our only connection in Vancouver to the rest of the world. So not just YVR, but our other regional airports as well played a critical role in keeping the region functioning, in ensuring that emergency personnel and supplies were able to reach the region, and then also just making sure that the economy continues to function in terms of getting goods in and out. How well did our own infrastructure stand up? Okay, actually, you can see here our ditches were full. They didn't overtop. Our groundside ditches also were full. They didn't overtop. We did see some flooding in and around the airfield. But I guess the beauty of all of that is that it was 2021, so we weren't busy. So we were able to record and to learn from how well our infrastructure stood up under this extreme weather event, and then begin to direct investment where it's needed to ensure that we're resilient to future events. Also during that year, it was like all number of things were thrown at us. We experienced a heat dome in June 2021. So we had temperatures 20 degrees above normal. 4 days in June exceeded 30 degrees centigrade. That meant that we were able to test our runways, despite the fact that traffic was lower. We were able to see what happens when those temperatures occur, and we achieved the max temperature that we'd ever achieved at YVR during that time, which was 32.4 degrees. But there were other communities in BC that were much hotter, much hotter than that. And the good news is actually that our runways perform fairly well. There are a couple of aircraft, the A340, which is now being phased out, that would not perform as well. But what we learned from that is no immediate need to extend our runways to accommodate traffic in hot weather. Last year, we experienced wildfires as well, significant numbers across BC with evacuation alerts. This is just a snapshot from a day, I can't remember when it was, probably August or so. And airports during that time provided an absolutely critical route for communities to evacuate. Fortunately, not too much here at YVR, but we were the recipient of evacuees. And one of the interesting things from that was that obviously the security personnel in those communities that need to evacuate also needed to evacuate. So a lot of questions about how do you deal with this? How do you get people out as quickly as possible when they're not security personnel on site to screen them? So there were instances where we had to do screening on arrival, which completely changes how you operate a terminal, for example. During that year, we did not have low visibility in Vancouver, but certainly in previous years, when we've had wildfires either in the US or north of us that affect us, it's pointed to the criticality of low visibility runway capabilities. So the instrument landing system that allows aircraft to continue to move and operate. And the likelihood is that over time, we will see a lot more of that here in Vancouver. And then snow. I know for most people, one assumes that it's Canada, and so snow is par for the course. We don't get a lot of it here in Vancouver, except in December 2022, we did get a lot of it. And it was a real learning experience, I think, for all of us here, both for carriers, for our partners at CATSA and USCBP, just how do we manage that? You know, there was such a joyous return of traffic, and I think this really took us by surprise in terms of the interruptions and disruption. So we put in place an action plan to deal with that. It includes enhanced winter and irregular operations, lots of investment in weather equipment, cross-team collaboration, again, data and technology and passenger support. Jennifer, I'm sensing that I might be running over because I can see your face there.
Do you know how much more do you?
Yes, I've got 3 more.
Sure, go ahead. No problem.
Okay.
You're good.
All right.
Yeah.
So tackling new challenges. I alluded to the fact earlier that our emissions, scope 1 and 2, are relatively small, 11,000 tons compared to overall airport supply chain emissions, 276,000 tons in 2022. So a key focus going forward is really on those emissions, whether it be through plugging in aircraft at the gate, through plugging in ground support equipment, to working with our partners on sustainable aviation fuel. And then moving forward, as we look at future demand, a key focus right now is aircraft electrification and the future of hydrogen aircraft. So aircraft electrification, just to give you an idea of the scale of the challenge, our terminal uses around 12 megawatts of electricity each day. Just for this small aircraft, which has a range of 200 kilometers electrical charge, that's 3 megawatts to plug in. So a quarter of our total load. So as we're looking at what the future holds, very close, in-depth thought about how do we generate that amount of electricity to diversify the fleet, and equally even with hydrogen, that also requires energy to produce. And so how do we do this in a way which, how do we plan for it in a way which ensures that we're not using up the province's electrical supply? So I'm going to stop there. Sorry, I probably did run a little bit over.
That's okay, no problem. I really appreciate it. There's something, I think somebody put a question here and I wanted to see if you can answer. Are digital twins commonly used at lots of airports?
Good question. They are not. Prior to us launching the digital twin, Hong Kong was the only airport that I'm aware of that had implemented one. But we're seeing it a lot more now. You know, none of this is unique to us in terms of our approach. There are a lot of other airports who are recognizing the importance of digital and who are investigating digital twin type applications.
Okay, I think there's a sub question to it. Do you see any issues that can arise from the use of the digital twins?
Not from the digital twin itself. I mean, obviously, this was a leap of faith that we took in terms of investing in it. And there was a lot of push and pull about, well, what's the business case? And because we weren't entirely sure about what the business case was, we kind of had to invest and then figure it out. So that would be my one caution. Is you know, it is an investment, and one's not always sure what the outcome is going to be. There's some digital applications, I think, that we're looking at now, biometrics and facial recognition, where I think there's a lot of concern, particularly about privacy. So that I would say, whether it's real or not, I think there are ways of managing that. And we have an opt-in program right now, and data is protected. But I think those would be the two that come to mind.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I don't think there's any more questions. Does anybody have any question for our speakers today?
Yes, I have one.
All right, Mary. All right, you can go ahead.
Well, thank you for that presentation.